Hello, my wonderful brothers and sisters in Christ. Today we're going to be reacting to a couple of quotes from G.K. Chesterton, here called the Apostle of Common Sense. G.K. Chesterton is a wonderful author within the Catholic tradition, and his quotes are an amazing source of wisdom about the Church. I really hope that seeing this and seeing my reaction to it will inspire you guys to take a look at some of his works. And if not, at the very least you get to see me laugh, smile a little bit, and rate a couple of quotes for a change instead of just some old memes. Although there will be more memes later, don't worry. If you guys like this, like, comment, and subscribe. Request more of these videos because there is an endless array of quotes from this guy and a wide variety of other Catholic figures that I can react to. And I'll give you guys what you want. Like I always say, you guys are the ones that make this entire project possible, and what I'm trying to do is help you guys out. This is the first quote here. I really love this one. I don't want to throw out a 10 out of 10 on this one because we're still using the rating system we would normally, but this one's pretty solid. Jesus promised his disciples three things: that they would be completely fearless, absurdly happy, and in constant trouble. Which, in the case of G.K. Chesterton, definitely true. This guy wrote a book way before World War II called Eugenics and Other Evil. He basically came out and said, all modern science, you're wrong. Race isn't real the way you think it is, and you shouldn't be talking about it like this. That was the equivalent of just coming out and saying, I reject all modern medical science, without warning. He was a man who really knew how to get into trouble, and he was a man who was always very happy. So we're going to give this one, let's see, a tentative 6 out of 10. Because I want to see the rest of the quotes before I start issuing 10 out of 10s. But this one's pretty funny. You know, there's that old trope that people on the left tend to have where it's like, well, if the church wasn't governing you 100 years ago, are you even living? Make it the opposite. If you're not in constant trouble with someone, are you really Christianitying, right? Christianitying? That's Christianing. Are you really Christianing, right, if you're not in constant trouble with someone, huh? We'll get on to the next quote now. This one's even more controversial than the first one. Tolerance is the virtue of people who do not believe in anything. Now, in the context of his works, this represents a broader point that Chesterton makes, which is that the way the modern world functions, that is, the way the kind of post-liberal revolution of the 1700s world operates, is by not contesting things as true or false. It's by behaving in a kind of mode of moral relativism in which you don't judge one religion more true than the other, one claim more true than the other, and as a result, effectively attempt to avoid conflict by not disagreeing on things. And so for him, this has been described, broadly speaking, as tolerance, which in the context of the sort of English literary tradition is the tolerance of things like John Locke's essay on tolerance. And so when he says this, he's not advocating per se for some kind of a rabid, violent intolerance by which you're insulting or assaulting everyone you disagree with, but rather he's advocating for an end to the kind of moral and ethical uncertainty that has defined so much of the modern period in which he lives. The defiant statement that some things are true and some things are false. Now, this one, being more of an intellectual claim, doesn't make me chuckle, obviously, as much as the previous one. So we're going to give this a 5 out of 10 on the humor standpoint, because this is still primarily a channel dealing with humor. But this one's a solid 8 out of 10 on the thought standpoint, because it does make a point that I don't think most of us think of, which is that to claim that we are right is implicitly to claim that others are wrong. And to understand that truth is real and objective, is the first step to fully, truly understanding one's Christianity, I believe. Moral issues are always terribly complex for someone without principles. This one, see, 2-3 weeks ago, I probably would have regarded this one primarily as another intellectual one, but having, over the past couple of weeks or so, I've actually had a chance to talk with a number of people that are basically epistemic skeptics. That is, they question the truth or falsehood of most things. Many of them are moral skeptics at the very least, and so they question what is right and wrong as a general principle in all cases. And that habit really does create a situation where they can't navigate moral rights and wrongs. I had a friend of mine, I was talking with him, and he made this point of saying, like, oh, this person did this thing that was terrible, and he did this thing that was awful, and, you know, he's so evil in what he's done. And then I was like, well, do you believe in right or wrong? And the guy had to admit that he doesn't believe in right and wrong, and so he's just abusing moral language to seem more justified in his castigations. Which, when you see that, you realize one of the things that Chesterton really liked to stress, which is that the world as we live in it today does not give people an efficient reason for believing in anything. The world, as we tend to think of it, is not catered toward truth. It's not catered toward this delineation between right and wrong. It's one where people just kind of abuse language and they don't know what they mean. They don't have the moral principles that G.K. Chesterton is talking about here. And because they don't have those, they don't know how to engage in conflict. They don't know how to engage with conflict. So this one, because it made me laugh, I'm getting it an 8 out of 10 on the comedy front, probably 9 out of 10 on the thought front. Don't worry, I'll give that 10 out of 10 at some point. Truth can understand error, but error cannot understand truth. This is another one of those ones where it really does highlight a basic reality of our modern world that I don't think we can deal with, which is that so much of the arguments that we engage with against our Catholic faith are just rooted in lies. So many of the arguments that you engage with in politics and media and culture, they boil down to lies. They boil down to some kind of a deep-seated misrepresentation of alternative viewpoints for the purposes of attempting to further them. I would get into listing some of these, but I don't wish to cause scandal or cause an offense by getting into a political discussion or a religious discussion. I suppose I'll deal with the religious issue a tiny bit to make my point. If you watch Protestant apologists addressing Catholicism, you will see very commonly that they just misrepresent the Church's teachings. They'll take the Catechism, for example, and they'll read a section of it, and then they'll use English language dictionaries to define the words, and take the English language definition of words in order to try to prove the Church is teaching something that, if you just go to the Church's official statements, it's clearly not teaching. And then they'll accuse Catholic apologists of gaslighting people when they point out the fact that this person's misread the text. Or, better yet, they'll point to documents which Catholics do not consider to be infallible, and which oppose one another, and say, here is an example of a change in the Church's doctrine, which violates infallibility. And they'll move forward as though that's an argument. The perfect example, I would say, is people who attempt to argue that the Church's claim is that our doctrine and our tradition never evolves, that it never shifts, that it never changes, that we never come to a deeper understanding of it. This claim is essentially the basis of a significant proportion of anti-Catholic polemics, because you will have Protestants that will say, oh, well, this Pope taught this, and this Pope taught that. That means that something changed, and because something changed, there go Catholicism wrong. And this style of arguing, it's just not, it's not good, it's not reasonable. But I've digressed a little bit. This one, it's not particularly funny. I guess most of these aren't really funny. This is probably a 9 out of 10 on the thinking scale, and it's probably more a 4 out of 10 on the comedy scale. I think I might put aside the comedy scale for the last one and just rank these on a thought standpoint, because I don't think really anyone other than the first one was particularly a gut buster, although all of them do reflect a very interesting bit of wisdom that we need in our day and age. The whole of the modern world has divided itself into conservatives and progressives. The business of progressives is to go on making mistakes, and the business of conservatives is to prevent mistakes from being corrected. I take back what I said. This is the 10 out of 10 on the comedy level. This is sort of on brand for Chesterton. It's just that mocking of both sides, that desire to sort of thumb his nose and, you know, do one of these to everyone involved in the discussion and say neither of you are fully understanding exactly what's going on in the world. And the sort of overall point of Chesterton's philosophy can be kind of represented in this quote here, which is that there are flaws in our world today that run so categorically deep that raw conservatism cannot fix the underlying social problems we have. We must have an awareness of where these flaws have come from and make an effort to try to repair them. And so we see with Chesterton's whole statement here, this deep awareness of that fact, of the sort of cracks at the root of what could be called modern liberal Western civilization that need to be addressed if we are to continue forward down our present path. And we also see, of course, within this his trademark desire to thumb his nose at progressives, which as a traditional conservative Catholic, he was not a particular fan of in most cases. We see in this quote a representation of what I would say is probably the proper Catholic understanding of politics, reasonably understood, which is that both sides are wrong on some things, and the only thing we should work toward is the achievement of the kingdom of Jesus Christ. So this quote, 10 out of 10 on the humor standpoint, 10 out of 10 on the thought standpoint as well. This one is the best of them by far. And so that brings us to the end of the video here, everybody. So because all of you are kings, as I made the point of saying before, all you guys are this dude right here, king of the world. I'm going to ask you guys to prayerfully consider being our patrons. Buy some stuff from our links below. If you can, donate to this ministry. Help us help the world, because our goal is to try to bring about a renaissance in literature, art, and Catholicism. And to do that, we need your help. I hope you guys will stand with us in this project, and God bless you all.